We are taught from an early age that transformation is an act of will, that we must wrestle our demons, tame our impulses, and climb towards some imagined pinnacle of self-improvement. But this is a misunderstanding born of fear. The psyche does not yield to violence, not even the refined violence of discipline and routine. The deeper self recoils from such impositions, for it knows that true transformation is not achieved, but allowed. There is a great power in stillness, but it is not the stillness of inaction. It is the stillness of attention, of openness. When we cease our frantic efforts to repair or perfect ourselves, we create a sacred space. In that space, the psyche begins to breathe. It begins to reveal its hidden architecture through symbols, dreams, and sudden intuitions, but only if we do not interfere. The modern mind is addicted to activity. It is uncomfortable with silence, with waiting. It wants results, plans, guarantees. But the soul works in mystery, not mechanics. It does not announce itself with clarity or logic, but with whispers and echoes. To hear it, one must quiet the noise of striving. Only then can the deeper voice speak. Stillness is not resignation. It is an active surrender. It is a posture of inner listening. To become still in this way is to step aside and let the old structures dissolve, not by tearing them down, but by no longer feeding them with energy. The masks we wear begin to slip away. The compulsions that once drove us lose their grip, not because we fought them, but because we stopped believing in them. Transformation is not a project, it is a process. Organic, cyclical, and deeply intelligent. It cannot be forced because it does not originate in the ego. The ego may long for change, but it does not know what change is truly needed. That knowledge resides in the deeper strata of the psyche, where the old wounds live and where the forgotten potentials sleep. There is something profoundly humbling in realizing that the most important movements in the soul happen without our permission. We do not awaken ourselves, we are awakened. We do not heal ourselves, we are invited to heal. And this invitation is rarely dramatic. It comes in quiet moments, a dream that lingers, a strange sense that something old is ready to fall away. These moments cannot be chased, they can only be welcomed. Thus, to do nothing differently is not to do nothing at all. It is to relinquish the illusion of control. It is to become a vessel rather than a builder. And in becoming a vessel, we make room for the true builder to emerge. Not the part of us that forces, but the part that knows, the part that remembers, the part that has been waiting patiently for us to be still long enough to hear it. The unconscious does not shout, it does not demand or insist, it waits, ancient, immense, and unmoved, beneath the noise of the waking mind. It is not something we access like a tool or a room we enter at will. It is something that unveils itself only when the time is right. And that time is rarely chosen by the ego. The ego, with all its urgency, is a narrow beam of light trying to illuminate a vast night sky. It is necessary, it gives us identity, direction, and order, but it is also inherently limited. The unconscious is not under the ego's command. It is the great other within. It holds not only our forgotten memories and suppressed emotions, but also the images of what we might become, potentialities too large, too wild, or too sacred for the ego to handle on its own. These images are often buried, not because they are unimportant, but because they are powerful. They wait until the ego, weary from its striving, lets go. Surrender is not defeat, it is a shift in relationship. When the ego surrenders, it does not vanish, it steps aside. It relinquishes its illusion of mastery and becomes a witness. In that moment, the unconscious begins to stir. Symbols emerge. A dream disrupts sleep. A pattern in one's life becomes too obvious to ignore. A quiet voice inside whispers a truth the ego has long denied. But the ego must be humble enough to listen. We are not the architects of our own depths. We do not summon meaning. It arises when the surface tension breaks, when the walls of certainty crack just enough to let something unknown in. The unconscious reveals itself not as a concept, but as an experience. It confronts us with images that disturb or awaken, forces that seem both alien and strangely familiar. We realize that we are more than we believed, and often less than we pretend. This is why crisis often precedes insight. The moment when the ego fails, when its strategies collapse and its illusions fall away, is often the threshold of revelation. In the darkness that follows, a new light begins to flicker. Not a light we create, but a light that finds us. That is the language of the unconscious, not instruction, but invitation. Not obedience, but resonance. To surrender is to trust that what lies beneath is not chaos, but an older, deeper order, one that has always been there, watching, waiting. When we stop trying to dominate our inner life, it begins to speak, not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a companion who was silenced by our need for control. In surrender, we do not lose ourselves. We begin, perhaps for the first time, to truly meet ourselves. To do nothing differently in a world that worships the new and the next is a radical act. It is not laziness, nor apathy, nor indifference. It is an affirmation, a quiet declaration that something within already knows. When one ceases the constant rearranging of outer forms and inner postures, it is not because one has given up, but because one has finally begun to trust. There is a wisdom in the self that predates all instruction. Beneath the curated identities, beneath the ideals borrowed from culture, religion, and family, there lives a presence, untouched by performance. This presence, this innermost self, carries the imprint of our wholeness, not as a goal to be achieved, but as a fact, quietly waiting to be remembered. To trust in this is no small thing. It means stepping away from the compulsion to fix, improve, or escape. It means standing in the center of the storm without reaching for distraction. It means believing that what is unfolding, even if it looks like confusion or stillness or regression, is part of a deeper intelligence at work. Doing nothing differently invites discomfort because it strips us of the illusion that we are in control. It removes the scaffolding of effort and leaves us with something far more vulnerable: presence. And yet in that presence, we may discover that we are not broken. We may see that the chaos we feared is not chaos at all, but a field being tilled in preparation for something new to grow. We have been conditioned to mistrust ourselves, to assume that without constant correction we will veer off course. But this is not the voice of the soul. It is the voice of fear dressed as discipline. The self does not need to be rescued by force. It needs space. It needs our faith. It needs our willingness to sit beside it, even when it is silent. To do nothing differently is to say, I am willing to meet myself as I am. This gesture carries a sacred weight. It signals to the deeper layers of the psyche that we are ready to relate, not dictate. We are ready to listen, not impose. It is this posture, this inner bowing, that allows movement to begin, not from the surface, but from the roots. Sometimes the self does not require change, it requires recognition. What is waiting to be seen is not a better version of you, but the original one, buried beneath all the effort to become. And when you stop moving long enough, when you cease trying to alter the unfolding, that version begins to rise. Not as an idea, but as a quiet return. In trusting the self, we relinquish the need for drama, for reinvention, for constant struggle. We make a sacred wager that our life already knows the way. And in that wager, we may find that nothing needs to be different, only more deeply known. There is a hunger in many souls, a restless longing for transformation, for escape, for newness. It takes many forms. The search for a different career, a new belief system, a revised identity, a reinvented self. At first glance, this appears noble. After all, to change is to grow, is it not? But not all movement is growth, not all longing is truth. Often the desire for change is a clever disguise, a veiled attempt to flee from what is already within. We are quick to redefine ourselves when discomfort arises. The moment something threatens our sense of certainty, we reach for tools to modify, to recalibrate, to redirect. But what if the discomfort is not asking to be solved? What if it is asking to be heard? Many turn to self-improvement as a balm for inner disquiet, but it can become a sophisticated form of avoidance. It offers the illusion of progress while keeping us forever one step removed from the core wound, the unresolved grief, the repressed memory, the fear that has followed us like a shadow. In such cases, the desire to change is not born from insight, but from resistance. There is a part of the psyche that will do anything not to face the deeper truths. It would rather rebuild the personality 1,000 times than sit in stillness and witness what has long been buried. Truth is not always beautiful. It does not flatter the ego or confirm our favorite narratives. It disrupts, it humbles, and yet it liberates. To remain as we are, not in stagnation but in sincere presence, requires more courage than any act of reinvention. It demands that we sit with the parts of ourselves we have tried to outrun, the abandoned child, the angry voice, the unbearable grief. These aspects do not vanish with new affirmations or ambitious resolutions. They wait in the dark, not to punish, but to be known. When we cease to chase change, when we resist the compulsion to fix what is not broken, a different kind of movement begins, a descent. Not downward into despair, but inward into depth. This is not the glamorous transformation celebrated by the world. It is quiet. It is private. It is the slow peeling back of illusions until only what is true remains. And the truth is rarely what we expected. It may reveal that the very thing we sought to escape holds the key to our wholeness. The pain we tried to numb, the trait we tried to erase, the flaw we swore to correct. Each may carry the seed of our return, but we cannot reclaim them while we are busy becoming someone else. So let the desire for change pause. Let it dissolve in the presence of stillness. Let it be questioned gently. Beneath it something more authentic waits. A knowing that does not seek escape, but reconciliation. When we stop avoiding, the truth begins to rise, and with it, a transformation not of appearance, but of essence. There is a common belief that progress lies in distance from the past, from the parts of ourselves we deem unworthy, from the patterns we are ashamed to admit we still repeat. We speak of leaving behind, moving on, reinventing, as though the self were a failed project that must be discarded for something better. But there is no true growth in escape. What is repressed does not die, it waits. What is denied does not disappear, it deepens its hold in shadow. The self is not an enemy. It is not something to outgrow or overcome. It is a living terrain, rich, layered, contradictory, containing all that we are and all we have been. Its wounds are not evidence of failure, but of life lived. Its fears are not flaws, but unspoken stories. To make progress is not to abandon the self, but to return to it with new eyes. This return is not easy. We are conditioned to judge ourselves, to fix what feels broken, to reject what is inconvenient. But the more we exile pieces of our own nature, the more fragmented we become. We wear masks for the world, and then forget how to take them off, even when alone. We chase ideals not because they are true, but because they give us permission to ignore what is already present. But befriending the self means sitting beside what we have tried to silence. It means asking not, how do I change this, but why is this here? It means looking at our sadness and seeing its wisdom, looking at our anger and listening to its pain, looking at our fear and hearing its plea to be met rather than dismissed. When we begin to relate to ourselves in this way, something remarkable happens. The self, long abandoned, begins to soften. It begins to open, not because it has been corrected, but because it has been seen. And in that seeing, the inner war begins to end. The scattered pieces draw closer. We are no longer divided against ourselves. This is the progress that cannot be charted in achievements or accolades. It is quiet, often invisible, but it is the kind of movement that changes the direction of a life. It is the shift from resistance to intimacy, from control to communion. And in that shift, a deeper intelligence begins to emerge, one that does not need to be imposed from outside, because it has lived within all along. The self, when befriended, becomes a guide. Its patterns become signposts. Its emotions become messages. Its very contradictions begin to reveal a greater order. We are not meant to transcend ourselves. We are meant to enter fully into our own depths and discover that what we feared was never the enemy, but the gatekeeper to a more honest life. To befriend the self is to finally come home. And only there, on that inner ground, can anything real begin to grow. There are forces within us, older than memory, primordial currents of meaning that do not belong to our personal history, yet shape the core of our being. These forces speak in images, not arguments, in dreams, not definitions. They do not come from us, but move through us. And yet, they are us, in our most essential and universal form. These are the great inner figures, the mother, the warrior, the sage, the child, the shadow, the lover, the trickster, timeless patterns of human experience that live within every psyche. They are not roles we play, but realities that emerge. They carry the blueprint of what it means to be whole, and they guide the unfolding of our lives when we are quiet enough to feel them. But the ego, in its insistence on control, tries to manage them, interpret them, use them. It wants to summon the hero on command, to silence the shadow, to hold the reins of the inner world. Yet these energies do not respond to command. They are like wild animals in a sacred forest, drawn out not by force, but by reverence. The more the ego intrudes, the more they retreat. Each archetype knows when to rise. The lover appears not when we demand passion, but when the heart opens in vulnerability. The inner sage does not come when we cram our minds with facts, but when silence falls and insight dawns like light at the edge of sleep. These energies are not manufactured, they are awakened, and they awaken best in stillness. To interfere is to delay. To attempt to engineer their arrival is to miss their message. For these figures do not speak the language of goals and strategies. They speak through the pattern of a recurring dream, the pull toward a certain kind of story, the inexplicable emotion that arises in an ordinary moment. They unfold as seasons do, without instruction yet always with purpose. When the ego surrenders its need to orchestrate, the archetypal begins to move. It may come first as confusion, as if some unknown force is moving us in a direction we did not plan. But beneath that confusion is coherence, an order more ancient than reason. We begin to notice symbols repeating in our lives, encounters that feel fated, inner voices with a wisdom we did not invent. These are the signs that something deeper is at work. The task is not to interfere, but to attend, to cultivate inner stillness, to soften the ego's grip, to create space for the mythic dimension of life to speak. It is not a matter of belief. These forces exist whether we name them or not. They wait not for our understanding, but for our openness. In time, they begin to weave us into a larger story, one not constructed by ambition, but revealed by participation, a story in which we are not merely individuals striving for meaning, but expressions of meaning already unfolding through us. And when that is felt, truly felt, the ego finally bows, not in defeat, but in awe. We have been taught to seize life, to shape it with plans, goals, and determination, to carve our paths like architects imposing structure upon raw stone. But life, real life, the kind that stirs from the soul's depths, does not respond to force, does not bloom under pressure, nor yield its gifts to command. It emerges when invited, not directed. To allow life to emerge is not to drift aimlessly. It is to recognize that there is a current beneath our striving, a movement older than our ambitions, wiser than our intentions. This movement is not chaotic, it is deeply ordered, but its logic is not that of the rational mind. It unfolds according to a rhythm we feel, not a script we write. The more we demand of life, the more elusive it becomes. The more we try to command it, to bend it to our vision, to wrestle it into submission, the more we lose touch with its true voice. Because life is not a thing to be controlled, it is a mystery to be met. This meeting requires presence, not projection. It requires listening rather than instructing. It is a shift from outer will to inner receptivity. And it often begins when our plans collapse, when the carefully drawn map disintegrates, and we are left with nothing but ourselves and the moment. That moment, raw and unscripted, is the opening. It is where life begins to speak in a different tongue. Not the loud proclamations of achievement, but the soft impulses of alignment. We start to notice synchronicities, symbols, longings we had buried. We begin to remember what we never truly learned, that the most meaningful directions arise from within, not from effort, but from attunement. To allow life to emerge is to trust that we are not separate from the whole, but participants in a larger unfolding. Our deepest impulses, when not censored by fear or the ego's demands, are not selfish. They are signals. They are how the larger pattern communicates through us. We do not need to force alignment. We need to become quiet enough to feel when we are out of it. And when we do, the adjustments required are often subtle. A shift in attention, a release of an old image, the courage to remain in the unknown a little longer. Life is not static, it is always in movement, and when we no longer stand in its way with our need to control, it begins to carry us, not as a tide overwhelms, but as a river that has always known its course. There is peace in this surrender, not because life becomes easy, but because we are no longer in constant resistance. In this way, alignment is not something we create, it is something we discover. And it waits not at the top of the mountain we are trying to climb, but at the center of the stillness we have long avoided. When we meet life there, not as master, but as witness, we find that it had been waiting all along for us to stop speaking and start listening. And so let us not be so quick to intervene, to fix, to shape what may already be in sacred motion. Let us become still enough to hear the quiet stirrings beneath our thoughts, to feel the deeper currents that do not shout but whisper. The self does not bloom under pressure, nor does the soul respond to command. What is essential within us unfolds in its own time, when met with attention rather than interference. To do nothing differently is not an act of passivity, but a profound act of trust. It is the recognition that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. And in this living, without forcing, without fleeing, we become vessels for something greater than ourselves. We remember what the noise had made us forget, that we are not separate from the path, but the path itself unfolds. So be still, let the deeper rhythms speak. Allow what is already true to rise, unprovoked, unforced. Life, when left uncommanded, does not collapse. It begins to align.